Ted Bundy was a serial killer, rapist, and necrophiliac who admitted to killing 30 women in the 1970s, though some experts believe his actual victim count might be over 100. He was arrested for good in February 1978 and received 3 separate death sentences for the murders of 2 Chi Omega sorority members at Florida State University and a 12-year-old girl. Bundy's charming appearance helped him become somewhat of a celebrity during his trial, and his case has since inspired many novels and movies about serial killers. He was executed in January 1989 at age 42. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Bundy on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. He started life as his mother's secret shame, as his illegitimate birth humiliated her deeply religious parents. Eleanor Louise Cowell, who went by Louise, was 22 years old when she delivered Ted at a home for unwed mothers. Later, Cowell brought her son to her parents in Philadelphia. Ted's birth certificate lists his father as unknown, so his biological father's identity might never be confirmed. However, there are some theories about who he might be. Anne Rule, a co-worker of Ted's and the author of The Stranger Beside Me, suggests Ted's father might have been Lloyd Marshall, an Air Force veteran and Penn State graduate. Other sources say Ted's father is Jack Worthington, and some rumors have it that his father was also his grandfather. To hide the fact he was an illegitimate child, Bundy was raised as the adopted son of his grandparents, and was told that his mother was his sister. Cowell moved with her young son to Tacoma, Washington, and in 1951 she married Johnny Bundy. While Ted took his name, he reportedly didn't have much respect for his stepfather, whom he resented for being too uneducated and working class. Johnny and Louise had several children together. Bundy graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in psychology in 1972. He was accepted to and attended law school in Utah, though he never earned his degree. While a student at the University of Washington, Bundy fell in love with a wealthy, pretty young woman from California named Diane Edwards. She had everything that he wanted: money, class, and influence. He was devastated by their breakup. Many of Bundy's later victims resembled his college girlfriend, attractive students with long, dark hair. By the mid-1970s, Bundy had transformed himself, becoming more outwardly confident and active in social and political matters. He even got a letter of recommendation from the Republican governor of Washington after working on his campaign. Bundy confessed to murdering 30 women across several states in the 1970s, but experts believe that the final tally might be closer to 100 or more. After years of maintaining his innocence, Bundy's admission of guilt arrived just before his death. "It all felt like a ploy to extend his life," said former FBI agent Bill Hagmaier, who spent considerable time with the killer after he'd been caught. His murders usually followed a gruesome pattern. He often raped his victims before beating them to death. Bundy often lured women into his car by pretending to be injured and asking for their help. Their kindness proved to be a fatal mistake. There is some debate as to when Bundy started killing. Most sources say he began his murderous rampage around 1974. Around this time, many women in the Seattle area and in nearby Oregon went missing. Stories circulated about some of the victims last being seen in the company of a young, dark-haired man known as Ted. However, criminologist Matt DeLisi argues in a 2023 book that Bundy likely murdered more than 100 people and started killing in adolescence. Bundy drops a lot of clues that there were way more murders, DeLisi said, later explaining that authorities were woefully unequipped to track Bundy. And the pacing and confidence with which he's killing between 1974 and 1978 indicates there's no way he could have just started. Ultimately, the exact number of women Bundy killed will never be known. Perhaps Bundy's most well-known girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, would eventually help police arrest the suspected serial killer. He and Klopfer began a 6-year relationship in 1969 after meeting in a Seattle bar. She was a single mom of a young daughter and struggled with alcoholism. Bundy took care of her, and she said he was warm and loving. By 1974, Klopfer started to suspect Bundy's crimes. When she questioned him about odd behaviors, like keeping a meat cleaver in his desk, he used his charm to deflect her concerns. Klopfer secretly went to the police with her suspicion of Bundy's involvement in prominent local murders, but they didn't believe he was the killer. The pair remained together, though they grew distant when Bundy moved to Olympia the following year. In 1975, Klopfer went to police again, this time with evidence that helped them to arrest the serial killer. Bundy had confessed to Klopfer over the phone from his prison cell that he had tried to kill her and couldn't resist his impulses when he felt his sickness building in him, she later wrote. She broke ties with Bundy for good and later wrote a book about her experience. In the fall of 1974, Bundy moved to Utah to attend law school, and women began disappearing there as well. The following year, he was pulled over by the police. A search of his vehicle uncovered a cache of burglary tools, a crowbar, a face mask, rope, and handcuffs. He was arrested for possession of these tools, and the police began to link him to much more sinister crimes. In 1975, Bundy was arrested in the kidnapping of Carol Durant, one of the few women to escape his clutches. He was convicted and received a 1 to 15-year jail sentence. Bundy escaped from prison twice in 1977. The first time, he was indicted on murder charges for the death of a young Colorado woman and decided to act as his own lawyer in the case. During a trip to the courthouse library, he jumped out a window and made his first escape. He was captured 8 days later. In December, Bundy escaped from custody again. He climbed out of a hole he made in the ceiling of his cell, having dropped more than 30 pounds to fit through the small opening. Authorities didn't discover that Bundy was missing for 15 hours, giving the serial killer a big head start on the police. After Bundy's second escape from prison, he eventually made his way to Tallahassee, Florida. On the night of January 14, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. He attacked 4 of the young female residents and killed 2 of them, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. On February 9th, Bundy kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. These crimes marked the end of his murderous rampage, as he was soon pulled over by the police later that month. The most damning evidence connecting Bundy to the 2 Chi Omega murders at FSU were bite marks on Levy's body, which were a definitive match to Bundy. Bundy's mother, Louise, was working as a secretary at the University of Puget Sound when Ted was accused of his crimes. She refused to believe the charges for years, though she changed her stance after he confessed. Bundy's good looks, charm, and intelligence made him something of a celebrity during his trial. He fought for his life, but in July 1979 was convicted for the murders of Bowman and Levy and given the death penalty twice. He spent 9 years on death row appealing his sentence. In 1980, Bundy received another death sentence for Leach's murder. It was this sentence that ultimately led to his execution by electric chair in 1989. Bundy appealed, trying to take his case as high as the U.S. Supreme Court, but he was turned down. He also offered information on some of unsolved murders, hoping to avoid the death penalty as a result, but couldn't delay punishment forever. In February 1980, Bundy married Carol Ann Boone, a mother of 2 whom he'd dated before his initial arrest. They wed in a courtroom during the penalty phase of his trial. He proposed and she accepted in the presence of the judge, making the marriage legitimate in Florida. The couple had met 6 years earlier when they both worked at the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, Washington. Boone eventually realized Bundy was guilty of his crimes. She divorced him in 1986, according to Rule's book, and moved to Washington with her daughter. Not much is known about Rose, also known as Rosa, today. It's believed Boone changed both of their names to help them stay out of the public eye. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed around 7 a.m. at a Florida state prison in an electric chair, sometimes known as Old Sparky. Outside the prison, crowds cheered and even set off fireworks after Bundy's execution. Some brought frying pans they banged on in celebration and chanted, "Burn, Bundy, burn." Bundy's body was cremated in Gainesville, Florida, and no public ceremony was held. Before he was executed, he requested his ashes be scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state, where he murdered at least 4 of his victims,